Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm with over 20 years of experience.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, or LTIF. It's focused on grocery-anchored retail real estate. These are the kinds of properties that some investors believe remain essential even in uncertain markets. People still need to buy food. That's what they say makes this sector more resilient and more stable over the long term.
Unlike many alternative investment funds that are only available to professionals, Greenman Open is open to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investments and a highly regulated structure.
Just remember, all investments carry risk. Values can go up or down, and past performance isn't a reliable guide to future returns. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but you should always speak to a financial advisor before investing. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Hello and welcome to this, our latest edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
Some of you got in touch earlier in the week demanding an emergency edition of Path to Power, which we don't do because both Ivan and myself are very busy with other commitments. And the temptation is always there to do emergency editions. But once we go down that slippery slope, God knows where it would end. And we knew that you'd want to wait to hear about our views in relation to Jim Gavin, Fianna Fáil, Micheál Martin's future, which is where we're going to start today. We will be getting to the budget in quite a bit of detail later on in this edition as well. But it has been an extraordinary week, the likes of which we've rarely seen before, Ivan. And this has been humiliating for so many people in Fianna Fáil, hasn't it?
So here I was. So Deirdre was flying out. She was set the alarm for 2:30 on Sunday night. And so I knew my sleep was going to be disrupted. She had a 6 a.m. flight from Dublin Airport, and by the time she got up to Dublin, and I was at home minding my own business, very busy week. I had 6 events on this week, and this was forwarded to me at 22:40. Dear colleague, I'm writing to let you know that Jim Gavin this evening informed me of his decision to step away from the presidential campaign with immediate effect. I fully understand his decision and believe it is the correct one. As we all know, Jim has achieved an enormous amount in his life, something which was seen by all of us who campaigned with him in the recent weeks. His commitment to service and helping others has always quite rightly defined his character and his great standing with the public. Jim has accepted that he made an error in relation to an issue which has arisen in recent days. As Jim himself has said, the office of Uachtar Ó Nahéireann is the highest in the land and the pinnacle of public service. He has also said he does not want to bring controversy to the office. This has been a difficult decision for Jim given his commitment to public service. I wish him well. I have no doubt that he will continue to make a significant contribution to Irish life, and regards, Micheál. Now, 2 TDs sent me that, as they had received, because every member of Fianna Fáil, card-carrying member, received that, which I'm not, I might add. And so, like, obviously from the Week in Politics programme, where, like, I had heard stories that he was at the GA special convention in Croke Park on Saturday. The phone was glued to his ear. And it is just incomprehensible, a couple of things. First of all, that he thought he could get 48 hours with saying, I'm looking into it, you know what I mean? And sort of making general reference to it.
It was more than 48 hours because Fianna Fáil knew before that questions were being raised.
When do you think they first knew? Like, knew explicitly, because I listened to the Niall Donald podcast, which I thought was entirely reasonable. I thought it was with Nicola Talon. I thought it was entirely reasonable. Here was a genuine guy, and like, the thing that just is incredible that I just cannot say. And I know there's a huge blame game going on, and there's huge, you know, it's an awful time for the Gavin family. But when you're considering, and you would consider for maybe 4 weeks before you'd actually agree to stand, you'd say, now, and I would have actually done this in my lifetime. Okay, so I had 63 landlords. It was a time of crisis with Celtic. Who were the people who were threatening to sue afterwards? What disgruntled punter? What ex-partner? Do you know what I mean? Like, what ex-employee that had a grievance? Like, it's not as if he had multiple tenancies. You know what I mean? How he didn't do some check. Okay, I like for 3,300 not to settle it up. You know what I mean? I just don't get that.
Okay, few things in relation to all of this. First of all, I suspect, and this is a hypothesis on my part, I don't have any inside information on it, but I would imagine that he possibly thought that if this hadn't come into the public domain during his time as Dublin football manager and all the way through the years, that it wasn't going to now. That essentially that it was something that was buried in the past and wasn't going to actually come up. That Niall Donald hadn't actually made an issue of it publicly, hadn't turned it into a story, and if he hadn't done so previously, he wouldn't do so now. That's the only thing that I think he might have been thinking, that he might have hoped that. Naively, but that's perhaps what he actually was thinking.
Because the bar for the presidency is higher than anything else you've done in your life.
Well, exactly it. And I think maybe that's because of the fact that he had no political experience that he didn't understand and didn't appreciate.
So the question I asked you, when do you think Fianna Fáil knew about it?
Well, that's
because he was selected on the 9th of September. It was first text to me that he was the muted candidate on the 28th of August. I rechecked my diary on these things. When do you think Fianna Fáil knew? Last Thursday?
Oh, I think they knew before that there was something. I think my understanding is that they got detailed questions at the end of last week, but that they had preliminary questions before that. And then when they didn't, when there was a sort of nothing coming back to the Irish Independent on the basis of the preliminary questions, they did further investigation. They just didn't take Niall Donald's word for it. They actually looked at the registry and all the rest of it, of the property and things.
But when I reflect on this podcast, because we would discuss this for several weeks, and when I first suggested Jim's name and so on, and, you know, there was suggestions of, we just call it women issues or marital issues or so on.
Yeah, and very unfairly stuff was
I said
spread about him, rumours, which was
but there was
really
a glint
unfair.
in your eye, and you said it to me both on air and off air. You know, and what about financial issues? And I actually hadn't heard anything about that. And it is true to say that Niall Donald was deputy editor of the Sunday World.
I don't know him.
But all you journalistic types, you know what you're like. And you always, you love gossip. And put it like this, apparently, you know, and like the one thing that came across to me was there was actually no malice. All he wanted was his money back, which he was entitled to. He actually couldn't afford to go to a solicitor to sort of exercise that right. And, you know, he goes into the small claims court is only 1,500 of a limit and so on. And that, you know, he actually had no option. But it would have taken so little to say, by the way, you know, for someone to ring from FF to say, I understand this outstanding issue. My God, you know, if he's a potential candidate, we need to have this resolved. Would you be open to settling it now and forgetting about it? And I think he would have been. Like, it wasn't as if he was out to get Jim Gavin. All he was out to get was 3,300 back.
Yeah, I put it this way. I wasn't aware of this particular story.
Are you sure now?
Let me explain.
You're developing amnesia like some of my political friends.
I wasn't aware of the issue in relation to the tenant and the unpaid rent. I was aware, going back a number of years, that Jim Gavin, and I have to be careful what I say here because I want to be, you know, it's been a difficult time for him and for his family. But he has said in response to the story that what he did was that this apartment wasn't bought as an investment property. It was where he and his wife lived. And then when they moved to a home in Rathfarnham, rather than selling the apartment, they did what a lot of people did in the Celtic Tiger era. They kept the apartment, and I think they merged the mortgages on the two properties and whatever. And I had heard a number of years ago that left him in financial difficulty. That was known, and it wasn't in journalistic circles that I got it from, because this might come as a surprise to you. When I'm finished work, I don't hang out with journalists. I hang out with lots of other people in other walks of life. And
they're not cool enough for you.
It was GAA people who said it to me. I think it would have been 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember when my ears pricked up at the time and stuff. It wasn't.
And of course, he wasn't. He was the under-20s manager. He wasn't. It wasn't until 2012 or so he became.
Yeah, he took over from Pat Gilroy,
the senior manager.
So anyway, the point is, I mean, I think an awful lot of people would have a degree, and in fairness, I think Niall Donald has sort of shown this degree of sympathy and understanding that an awful lot of people were in a deep financial hole around the time.
Tell me about it, John.
Yeah, and Niall Donald himself, you know, needed the money and the rest of it. And Jim Gavin, you know, he should have refunded the money. I mean, it was just a grievous error to make. And it was disqualifying in the sense that you can understand why it is that completely ended his presidential campaign. However, can I just say in relation to that, it was the final blow. His campaign was floundering anyway. And I think this has been largely overlooked in a lot of the discussion. What also Fianna Fáil would have seen before his disastrous appearance on the Week in Politics debate was that his campaign was in freefall, right? He was down in third place. I think it was somewhere around 21, 22%, or was it even that
15.
much? Sorry, 15. Sorry, excuse me, 15.
So the poll figure is just to be clear.
Yeah.
We're 32 for Catherine Connolly. Yeah. This is in Ireland things. Something like 23 for Heather and 15 for him. And when you eliminated it, it worked out 53-47 in the final count of Connolly to beat Heather Humphreys.
Yeah. So you were telling about having to get up early Monday morning. I also had to get up early on Monday morning because I was coming back from Portugal. And
hence no emergency podcast. But carry on. If I was coming home from where we would have had one, but carry on.
Anyway, I was on a very early flight and I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning. And my phone had been busy on Sunday with people pinging me messages about Jim Gavin. First of all, about the opinion poll results and people in Fianna Fáil saying that this campaign is imploding. And this is before the Week in Politics appearance. They were saying that he's just, even before any of the story came out over the weekend.
Fionnán Sheahan's story was out Saturday morning.
Yeah, but the opinion poll
was
conducted in advance of that.
Yes, yeah.
So as far as that, and they were saying it's only going further downwards. This is like heading into, as one person said to me, this is heading into Gay Mitchell territory, right? So they knew they were in deep trouble anyway. And then, of course, is the debacle of how he handled the issue on the Week in Politics, and particularly afterwards when Louise Byrne of the Irish Examiner pressed him in the press conference.
And the RTB registration.
And the fact, whatever as well about, the money, and he couldn't remember, and then claiming, well, the rules were new in relation to registration. They were 5 years old, the laws in relation to this. He was gone. I mean, a floundering campaign was absolutely finished. And that then... Remember the phrase I would have used with you, and it's been used a lot over the last week, but I used it very specifically back in the week that we did the podcast that he came forward to stand for them. And I said, has Fianna Fáil done its due diligence? And I said that deliberately at the time because I was wondering, were there things there that could blow up his campaign? But even leaving that aside, he was a dreadful campaigner. He was really poor.
I thought he was improving.
But you don't have time to improve. You have to hit the ground running. You have to be. And he had this thing when he was Dublin football manager as well, that he was largely evasive. In the way that sometimes a lot of sports people...
you can refuse to answer questions when you're a banished door.
Yeah.
Can I just interject one thing that I don't think has been looked at all in this? Because I went through... I'll never forget it in the circumstances of January 11, whereby my company, Celtic Bookmakers, went into receivership. The bank takes control of your accounts. So if it was the case that he had a mortgage, right, and it was pertaining to this flat, and the standing order wasn't stopped, it could be the case, and I put it like this, I think the question should be asked, did Jim Gavin ever get the money? In other words, the bank keeps all money in that account. In other words, I had a particular dispute which went to the High Court subsequently when they were filing for my bankruptcy about continuing interest charges long after the company ceased to trade, and the bill was then transferred to my personal guarantee.
There's a difference there in that.
See, this property had to be sold by the bank, the apartment.
Yeah, but... Yeah,
so there are issues there. They actually don't affect Niall, Donald, but put it like this: it would not surprise me if Jim did not get the benefit of some of this money.
The bank could take it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm raising that question. But put it like this: it doesn't look.
Can I raise another question, which I don't think has been discussed enough this week as well? I mean, people are going on about how much money this is going to cost Fianna Fáil. I mean, there's been speculation that Fianna Fáil is down £500,000.
Well, that was their full budget. Like, I don't know if Litter on Tuacon will go ahead, which is the leaflet for every household.
No, but there's an awful lot of the money. The posters were purchased. They're expensive. They used a professional firm to put them up in most places, apart from the sort of the photos of things like former Dublin
No,
footballers.
the original budget was about 500 grand.
Right, okay, so just hear me out on this. So all the social media spend was done, all the posters, the firm that was hired to put up the posters still has to take down the posters. So there's an awful lot of that money. But my understanding as well from talking to people is that Jim Gavin would have been expected to make his own contribution towards
he did
the
have a
cost.
fundraising team of his own.
Yeah, right. And my understanding is that he was expected to come up with between 100 and 150,000 euro. I mean,
Actually, I've seen letters that were sent out on behalf of Jim, personally, not Fianna Fáil letters, to support the campaign.
I wonder where he's going to be at now in actually collecting that money. I think he's going to be dependent on the generosity of many GA people to actually say, okay, he made a mistake. And he's actually paid an enormous price for that mistake.
And that's what I felt really sorry in terms of, like, it's a sad, because how long did we discuss people who might have made good presidents and decided not to consider it? Do you know what I mean? That this is just such an unbelievable campaign because there's no policy, there's no power at issue. It really just, the phrase I've used, more skeletons get exposed than is in Glasnevin Cemetery. But I want to ask you this. So, the shit hits the fan anyway, Saturday, that this is unsustainable, I'm looking into it and so on. So Micheál comes up from Cork and he meets Jim on the Sunday afternoon. My question to you is, from your sources, or what do you think, was he told to stand down, or did he offer to stand down, or did they agree that? Was he pushed, or did he go voluntarily?
I don't know. I'd be quite honest, I have no
I don't know
information.
either.
I would suspect, though, very strongly that Fianna Fáil told him this is over.
Right.
That they knew there was no way back from this. That if he had not returned that, unless Jim Gavin could turn around and show proof that he had returned that money to Niall Donald, there was no. The campaign was heading for absolute disaster. Better to abort then than to try and defend and promote the man over the next few weeks of the remaining of the campaign.
I don't know why between the Thursday and the Sunday they didn't make some attempt to reach out to Niall Donald. Niall Donald, actually, what apparently, according to his podcast, was when he saw in response to Fionn Sheahan's official inquiries that it was denied, the story. That's just not true. It just there's no recollection of it. Jim denies it, and therefore we're denying it. I mean, like how someone didn't say, maybe we should have a chat with this guy. He was ringing Fianna Fáil headquarters. We should have a chat with this guy and try and see, can we reach some sort of amicable settlement? This is in the heat of it. You know what I mean? I just don't understand. Like, that's what anyone would do. You know what I mean? Like,
what, you're not going to suggest that somebody would have quietly said, look, here's 3,300 euro.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm
suggesting. For God's sake.
No,
are you trying to say you were a corrupted journalist?
No. What I'm saying is, if Niall Donald then issued a statement and said, this was a long-standing dispute, but been resolved, game over, in terms of move on. Like, that's whether that wasn't done at any point in August or September, to me, is mind-blowing, because it's a trifling amount of money in the context of the election budget and all the rest of it, because, like, that brings us on.
Sorry, isn't it ironic? Isn't it so ironic as well that 3,300 euro brings down the candidate selected by Micheál Martin, who had refused to let Bertie Ahern be the candidate because of the money that had been resting in Bertie Ahern's account, much bigger sums of money. I mean, the irony of it was just quite extraordinary.
So that leads us then on to the much bigger political story. The hurt, the anger, the upset of Fianna Fáil members across on Monday morning was absolutely without limit. And definitely the situation was that this had turned into a full-blown existential crisis for the leadership of Micheál Martin, and that this needs to be probed insofar as what actually happened. So let's be clear. The rules are that 10 members of the parliamentary party's name is required to put down a motion of no confidence. And so we'll take the rump of Billy Kelleher's 29. At the end of the day, this always comes down to maths, right? It's always going to, can we get to 36, right? And can we, the only way we can get to 36, I think it was perceived, we need someone to front this up. And I think it's true to say with the passage of time, from what I've gleaned by those who are definitely in the top 20 of the 29, right? You know, they just had enough of Micheál. They're not going to get preferment on him, and the sooner the better they see the back of him. And it's amazing how many of them are from Cork. The fact of the matter is that they have identified themselves, not 100%, but almost basically with Jim O'Callaghan.
Yeah.
And so Jim O'Callaghan faced a moment of truth, sort of put up or shut up sort of thing, and so on. And very quickly he had to make two calculations, right? And this is raw politics, power politics at this stage. So if I win this, I'm going to be Taoiseach within a fortnight. There'll be a leadership contest because, if you actually strike the fatal blow, you have a head start on everyone else and you have a team in place. Okay, so
although there is a saying in politics, isn't it, that the person who wields the sword never wins the crown?
Well, it never is very strong, but often doesn't. But the second permutation is like Albert Reynolds. You go at Haughey, you lose, you go to the backbenches, but when it inevitably comes up in a year's time, you're actually organised. You know what I mean? So, that's what Albert did. Remember Flynn got sacked and all that?
In the case of Reynolds and Haughey, it only took a few months.
Yeah.
It actually didn't even last.
So sometimes you have to lose one to win one, if you know what I mean. So all those considerations were going through not only Jim O'Callaghan's mind, in my opinion, but in terms of his most committed supporters. And the truth is that by Tuesday night, it was emerging they didn't quite have the numbers. Now, in all heaves, like I've seen so many of them in Fine Gael, the incumbent has great advantages. When you're Taoiseach, it's almost you have all the advantages because people's jobs are on the line.
Okay. We need to take a break. And I'm just going to suggest I'm going to come back to you with a number of thoughts in relation to that. And then we have to get to the budget as well. But we'll do that after this break.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. This fund is managed in Ireland. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Now, before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments could go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Welcome back to the second part of Path to Power. Okay, I want to talk to you now, Ivan, about what I'm hearing in relation to the Jim O'Callaghan situation. This is very interesting, right? Because I saw a piece in the Irish Times during the week by Jack Horgan-Jones, who was comparing what happened this week with Micheál Martin at Wednesday night's parliamentary party meeting and what happened in Cavan at the Think-In in 2021, when there was a lot of disgruntlement about the way that Micheál Martin was operating, things that you referred to last week about his group of unelected officials who were the key people rather than members of the parliamentary party.
The real Taoiseach and all of those, yeah.
I think there's a massive difference 4 years on from that time in Cavan, an enormous difference, right? And the differences, there's a number of them, right? One is that with the passage of time, Micheál Martin is older and people are looking to the time when he will be, as they see it, too old to be re-electable. So he was still re-electable back in 2021 or whatever and stuff. Secondly, in 2021, there was no obvious candidate to replace him. There was nobody. And he had done a clever job in the sense of that he hadn't given Jim O'Callaghan a position who I think he may have identified as the strongest.
And he had no deputy leader.
Yeah, right. So he was in a situation back then where he didn't actually really have to worry too much about who might be there to replace him. You roll on 4 years into 2025, where we're at now at this stage, and he's in his second term as Taoiseach. There's a whole range of things here, right? He has a deputy leader who he appointed to everybody's surprise, who is now also the lightning rod for a lot of negative criticism because there's a feeling that he was intimately involved in the selection of Jim Gavin as well.
He was Director of Elections.
Director of Elections at the same time as the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, and we'll get to the budget in a while, because I think what's perhaps been overshadowed is that there must be an awful lot of TDs in Fianna Fáil who were very unhappy at elements of this budget as well. A lot of them, right? But in the meantime, what has happened is Jim O'Callaghan has become a minister. He couldn't be held off for any longer. And as a Minister for Justice, he has had a good first year when it comes to public pronouncements about issues in relation to him. He has looked an awful lot more authoritative than his predecessor, Helen McEntee. And he has said a lot of the right things as far as the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party is concerned when it comes to things like immigration, that too much money has been spent on the IPAS centres, that people have to be deported. He's even organised the flights. Helen McEntee spoke of deportation flights. Jim O'Callaghan has made sure that they've gone ahead. Now, that plays to a certain part of the audience. So Jim O'Callaghan is in a stronger position now. Jim O'Callaghan also was clearly reluctant to endorse Jim Gavin, and has admitted since that he made a mistake in endorsing Jim Gavin. But it is quite clear what he did in endorsing Jim Gavin by doing so late. He realised he had to, because if he didn't, it would have been seen as a blow against Micheál Martin. And I think all of the people who would support him in the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party see that and understand it. And by the same token, this week, he has expressed his support for Micheál Martin. He's been loyal. Everyone knows he's just going through the motions of doing what he has to do. So I'm going to use this analogy, and please don't be offended by my using it. How did you go bankrupt? And then slowly, and then all at once.
Very quickly, yeah.
And then very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain element of that's now where we're at with Micheál Martin, that his power is ebbing slowly away, and something will happen to make it go all at once. And I think Micheál Martin, as I said to you before, I thought he was putting Jack Chambers in as a block against anyone else emerging to challenge him for the leadership. I think that he wants to be Taoiseach again. He will hand over to Simon Harris at the end of 27. He was very keen on the whole thing about seeing out the EU presidency and all the rest of it. And I think he wanted to go into the next election in 29 as leader of Fianna Fáil. And I think what's happened now is that has become almost impossible. And then the issue within Fianna Fáil is going to be, at what time do they decide? Is it that they remove him as leader when his term as Taoiseach finishes? Or do they want the next leader to have time as Taoiseach? Do they want Jim O'Callaghan to be going into an election as a former Taoiseach? What do you think?
None of that I'd particularly disagree with, but I've already said when Billy Kelleher got 40% of the vote, flying in the face of what the leader wanted and working all out on the phones to secure, showed a level of defiance that I said explicitly there are no circumstances at that point in time that he will lead Fianna Fáil into the next election. And let's be fair about it. You know, the next election is in November 29. He will have been 18 years as leader.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, give us a break.
Yeah, but he lives for it. But isn't there another irony in all of this?
He could have gone for the park.
Exactly. When you think about it, he came up with Jim Gavin just to stop the rumblings that, Micheál, we have nobody in Fianna Fáil who's good enough. You've got to go for it. And he didn't want to be retired off and parked off to Orison. I wonder now, is he thinking, God, maybe I might have been better off?
So the question is, where stands the authority and the leadership of Micheál Martin now, and how long will he survive as leader? I think these events mean that he had enormous political capital. In June of last year, it was an exceptional performance to get 250 councillors elected to be the largest party in local government. It was an exceptional achievement to get 48 TDs elected. And the truth of it was that he had enormous political capital. You could actually argue he was more popular, particularly amongst Fine Gael supporters and obtaining transfers, than actually Fianna Fáil. In the last week, he has expended all that political capital. It was an Oscar-winning performance. Now, the lips quivering and the hands shaking. Give me a break. So anyway,
he also had to be very humble. And he had to apologise.
I said it was Oscar-winning performance,
and he apparently made so many phone calls. I don't think he's ever been as busy in recent years.
John Bruton used to do that in the Heaves. Yeah. He had to get them one and keep a notebook of what they all said.
There were certain people who didn't get phone calls, I was told.
Oh, yes, I know that.
Yeah. So you might have been talking to the same people I've been talking to.
One of the things that surprised me was sometimes I find myself stuck in the head of the bubble, and I happened to be speaking yesterday because we share a birthday and we know each other for 40 years, Stuart Kenny, who I regard...
Sorry, was it your birthday yesterday?
No, not for a couple of weeks, but we share a birthday, him and me, right? Stuart Kenny. And Stuart Kenny is retired now.
Former boss of Paddy Power Bookmakers.
Yes, and also...
And also a brilliant advocate now in relation to the damage done by gambling.
But doesn't stop him from having a bet. And in
moderation.
As I told you when it came to the US election, he is my reference point. Yeah. Who has he put money on? And he had backed Connolly to top the poll, and he'd actually laid Jim Gavin. So I hadn't actually been speaking to him for weeks. And I said, what do you make of the Micheál situation? So this guy's head's definitely not in the bubble. He said, Micheál should have resigned. And I said, get a grip. I said, he's worked so hard to get the EU presidency for the next year. He harbours thoughts beyond that. But I said, there's no way he's going to give up the top job that he's worked for 30 years to get to, and so on. Like, what? You're actually talking nonsense. And he said, look, he said, at some point in politics, your luck runs out. And he said, actually, Leo wasn't so foolish because at least Leo got to pick his own terms in which you depart. Like, if you have an illustrious career, take Thatcher, you know what I mean? Do you end it by being ousted, or do you do it on your own terms? And I would say to Micheál, directly, I'd say it to his face, that he actually has to now reflect post the EU presidency, which he does crave, and he sees a lot of important dossiers there. And, he's entitled to, 2 years at least, having got the mandate and so on. But I actually think in January 2027, for his own sake, he should be looking at his next career and he should be looking at his possibilities. Otherwise, I think he's not going to be in control of his own destiny.
Okay.
Would you disagree with that?
No, I can see the logic. I think the best he can probably hope for at this stage is that he safely gets to the end of the EU presidency. What he's got to fear is that the unexpected comes up and fatally undermines him in the meantime.
Saturday night, 7:30. Yeah. Clayton Hotel, the Old Burlow.
Yeah.
The Corja Fianna Fáil dinner. It's a sellout.
Is it?
Oh, they're all people who've been disaffected and so on. They'll all be there, and you can take it every putative candidate. Darragh O'Brien will be working the room. Derek Cleary will be working the room. Every potential cabinet minister and wannabe leader, and people who want to get into the finance portfolio. James Lawrence, they'll all be working the room, and they'll all be. I'd say the gossip will be just unbelievable.
Did you get an invite for it?
No, I didn't.
Because I did actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
God.
First time, I actually just realised I forgot to actually respond to the invite.
How rude is that?
Sorry.
Sorry, was this an opportunity to pay €150? Or
No, they didn't ask for any money. Sometimes they ask journalists, and I remember the last time I went was out in City West about 15 years ago. I was prevailed upon, was even more, would have been back in the Celtic Tiger era, and my producer at the time one of my producers at the time on The Last Word, Kieran Gary, prevailed upon me to go, and I don't want to fucking go and stuff. And I never went again afterwards. It was my one and only time that I went. But even in the interest of research
for Path to Power, you wouldn't consider it essential.
It's my youngest fella's birthday on Saturday, so we're going all out as a family thing. So that's how there's no. And the other alternative would be to watch Ireland and Portugal, which I'm missing anyway. But maybe there's not much to be missed in that. By the way, the rest of our presidential discussion, when we talk about Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys and their respective campaigns, is going to be part of our subscription edition. Sorry about that, but we have so much to talk about, and we need to talk about the budget.
Yeah, and before we pivot to the budget, can I make an unashamed plug for which I have no skin in the game? But if you are interested in politics, if you're interested in a career in politics, there is one seminal publication every 5 years that you must read. It has every count of every one of the 43 constituencies. It has the telephone numbers of nearly every TD and senator, and it is the Irish Times AIB-sponsored Neelan Guide to Politics. Tim Ryan is a friend of mine. He edited it. I got my own copy. It's €35. You can get it at neelanguide.com.
Or was there a bit of a Pascal Donoghue to Claire Byrne here in that he gave you a free copy of it?
The situation is, I actually text him to say, I'm insisting on paying for it. And I launched another book for him, and he said, no, it's in payment for that, because book launches aren't remunerative. But the point about it is this, that I leafed through it, and but I actually find when I'm researching the next election, the amount of information...
it's excellent.
So if you're interested in politics, leaving aside, I know you have a book coming out on Dunn Stores.
I was just... Thank you, Ivan, for remembering
It's not Who Owns Ireland Again, is
No,
it?
it's not. This one is...
2.0.
No, this is Dynasty, which will be out next Thursday.
And is it the based on the serial in it's like Succession? So it's about the Dunn family.
It's about the Dunn family. It's about Dunn Stores as a business since it was set up 80 years ago. It is about how Ireland has changed so incredibly as an economy, as a consumer society, as society in general. And there is a section which is very political because I go into what happened in relation to Charlie Haughey and Michael Lowry. Michael Lowry features very prominently in the book. And to be honest, when I went back and I reread the Moriarty Tribunal report and the McCracken report and went back over my own writing from the time and various other
Did
stuff.
the Dunn family cooperate with you?
No, they did not.
Isn't it amazing about all your books? Same as Michael O'Leary and Ryan. It's that the people who know most don't cooperate with you.
Yeah, but they have their own
It makes it
story
more
to
independent
tell.
and objective, I suppose.
Yes, that's. I mean,
does Ben come out of Ben Senior?
Ben Senior?
No, Ben Middle.
Yeah, there's Ben Senior, Ben Junior.
My friend.
There's another Ben as well as that actually happens.
Yeah,
who's Frank's son. But anyway.
Right. So let's just take the Ben Dunn that we all know that fell out with Margaret and all that kind of. Does he come out of the book well or badly?
I'm going to have to give you a copy of the book and see if you can make up your own mind for yourself. But make sure you've got 20 quid with you next week, because I'm not giving it to you for free.
Okay, well, all right, we'll move on. We won't be plugging that book anyway. Now,
it's out in all bookshelves next Thursday.
Okay,
anyway,
are you doing the launch?
I'm not doing a launch.
Okay,
No,
that's the modern thing, is it?
No, we actually just couldn't organise a time that would actually work. I mean, the thing is, I was actually considering a launch, and I was going to ask you to launch the book.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking I probably couldn't afford you.
Well, that's true. That's true.
If we do a belated book launch, and also your very busy schedule, because this is your time.
Let's get on to Budget 2026. Anyway. Can I give you an opening salvo? Because I'm sure the back page of the Business Post and the Saturday page and the Daily Mail and various other different podcasts you do will all be full of the budget.
Not the other podcasts.
But can I give you some top line things?
Yeah.
And you can go any vignette you like. So first of all, I've been of the view for some time that courage is completely absent in national politics, telling people what they don't want to hear. Not since the crash, really, has that sort of quality being around. And I saw some signs that there was an ability to say no to people when they're shouting at you. So this budget was quite different to the last five. It was not populist. It didn't attempt to be populist. It attempted to be pro-business and have a jobs focus, and defiantly said to taxpayers who are going to pay, because of growth in incomes, $2.5 billion more in income tax. Ian Geider was saying those figures actually on your programme before the budget came out. This is on the white paper published over the weekend. So I think some marks for the government that. I think there's some marks for keeping your promises. Everyone may have said it's a daft idea to reduce VAT on the hospitality. As I told you, with the RAI, Adrian Cummins' Restaurant Association and VFI, I chaired the day of action about that, which was really a touch point last autumn about that. And you know what? It's only reverting to the rate that it was previously. And look, all that's been done to death. I also found quite interesting, people were saying, oh, I'm not better off. Like, when was it a divine right that you had to be better off with every budget?
Oh, come on.
Oh, no, I'm not done. Just, and I'll let you have a good run at it. So, I think there's particular things on housing that are worthy of consideration. The biggest thing in housing would be to reintroduce the rebate for development contributions, not just for apartments, and the Irish water thing, which wasn't done. So actually, outside of apartments, very little was done, but a lot was done on apartments, reducing the VAT rates. But my overriding point is this, Matt, and it's a serious point. Total, they have a lovely website, Where Does Your Money Go? And it gives the top line of, capital and current and all spending. The figure of total expenditure in 2019, which I think is the best thing pre-COVID, because COVID was an emergency, what happened to Ukraine was an emergency, and so on. Total expenditure was 77 billion. We're now looking at 132 billion.
Yeah, you're taking the non-voted expenditure in there as well.
Well, so what I'm saying is this, and actually, the finances for 2025 are actually on 2024. Total spending is up 12.5 billion, 13%. Inflation is 3%. So the fact that what I'm really saying is this: there is actually no management of budgets anymore. There is no cost control in line departments and state agencies. And this wasn't mentioned really in the budget. And what I would say is this: the government will continue to get grief from taxpayers on all fronts about not doing enough for this and not doing enough, simply because the structure and the systemic expenditure is just out of control.
Okay, and I've written about that actually earlier in the week on Wednesday morning, the day after the budget, for the Mail, prompted by some of the stuff that Ian Guider and myself have been discussing on the radio on Tuesday, and I will get back to that in a minute. I want to talk about the income tax situation first, though. So you have a budget where the experts had told the government, do not break your 5% increase in spending limit. Do not do it. It is inflationary. It is dangerous to the economy. And the government broke by 8%, went up 8%. So it vaulted over the 5% limit. That's the first thing. But in that 8%, 9.4 billion, which is what they had set out in the summer economic statement, 8.1 billion on additional spending, both current and capital. And then you had only 1.3 billion on taxes.
Which was less than in the summer economic statement.
200 million euro less. So a redistribution. Of that 1.3 billion, there was a lot of things done in relation to other things in relation to business, like the R&D credit and whatever, which I think will probably be seen to be worthwhile investments in trying to copper fasten and save the corporation tax revenues we have coming in. So I can understand that. But politically, I've just found this baffling, what they've done, right? And they left open goals to the opposition, and they, I think, have sort of left an awful lot of really... And I could see it with a lot of people I knew, younger people in particular, people with lower incomes, who were completely shook to discover that, well, we knew we weren't going to get the one-off cost of living payments, the things like the energy credits or the double child benefit and things like that. I think there was, and they paved the way from that. But to not index the bands, not to adjust the credits to deal with inflation.
That costs $1 billion.
I know it costs $1 billion, but this comes down to an issue of choices, right? It's not like they were actually curtailing their budget or pulling it in. They chose, instead of letting people keep more of their own money, they decided to put it into spending. They made that priority. The ESRI Friday morning is out to say that the average household is going to have 2% less disposable pay as a result of this budget, at a time when inflation is going up again. Inflation 2.7%, but within that inflation of 2.7%, essentials like food and drink up 4.7%. The things that are pulling down inflation are mainly optional spending, things like furnishings and furniture and stuff like that. So politically, it strikes me as quite extraordinary that you have the government removing one-off credits, and even if they couldn't cut tax rates, indexation so that people didn't feel worse off on their basic taxes, I would have thought was a political necessity, which is why I think that in time this will come back to bite the government politically. I thought that was quite extraordinary.
But they did that deliberately. They knew that this would be very unpopular. It's not as if, oh my God, we never thought of this. They actually deliberately decided not to do it. And I can't remember a budget that there wasn't some level of indexation.
It's about a decade since it's happened. It's over a decade since it happened. I mean, you got to remember as well, like, you know, there's a significant portion of people who are still highly pissed off by having to pay the USC. Yeah. So I thought overall this left the door wide open. Now, there is a certain irony in that much of the opposition complains about not enough money being spent and would incur higher taxes in various parts of the economy. But this gave them the opportunity to jump up in defence of the middle, squeeze middle, all the rest of it and stuff like that. Right. Now, the overall figures. And I just take them slightly because there's voted expenditure and non-voted expenditure. So Ian Guider pointed this out to me on Tuesday on Budget Day. And as I said, I've written about it as well. Because back in the budget of 2018, the voted expenditure in the budget was just under 67 billion. Right? Mm-hmm. Since then, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, but we're now up to 117.8 billion, a 78% increase in government spending over 7 years before you get into the other stuff, such as the expenses for holding the EU presidency.
It's unsustainable.
It is extraordinary. I mean, everyone goes on about, have we forgotten the lessons of the Celtic Tiger bust? And everyone focuses on, oh, look, remember we were dependent on the property taxes back at the time to pay the bills, and when they dried up, we got into trouble. We're now talking about windfall corporation taxes. And if you actually strip out what's regarded as the windfall element, then the government is consistently running deficits, which are getting bigger and bigger. But even leaving that aside, I know we need extra Gardaí, we need extra nurses, we need extra teachers and things like that. But the size of the public sector, again, was one of the major issues that in the last crash we said we would never allow ourselves to get back into that position again. And that's exactly what we're doing, isn't it? And there seems to be an assumption all the time. Again, there's sort of an inconsistency and illogicality in the way many people complain about, oh, the state isn't delivering enough. Spend more money on delivery of services. And at the same time, the same people are complaining about how much money is wasted and is badly spent. And we just could let this continue.
Yeah, no, and there is no real attempt to tell people that they must live within their budgets or they must find value for money savings in their department. It just doesn't seem to be part of the lingo. Look, we've got to also consider here the electoral cycle. You know, they don't have to face.
Do you think people will forget by 4 years' time?
I do.
Know.
Like people will not remember. Like they'll just remember the here and now. Like if you make people better off in 27, 28. No, you know, if
they have the opportunity
if IPAC is right, and so on. But like, let's compare with the opposition. Like, they wanted energy credits. They want even more money spent on health and education. They want more money spent on the justice system. Like, I actually think that our level of political discourse is actually desperate in this country.
But isn't it also, just the final point before we and we say everything else will be on the subscription edition, but hasn't our political discourse changed, that there is nobody who is arguing for income tax cuts?
There's no PD.
I was trying to remember back to the creation of the Progressive Democrats back in the 1980s. I still would have been in college. You'd have been in the Dáil at the time. And it was on two things, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. It was a party that went to be socially liberal or more liberal than applied at the time, if not necessarily as liberal as we got afterwards, but also was in relation to the economy, to let people have more of their own money to spend. You know, pivoting on the back of the tax marches of the 1970s and 1980s, when people complained about the crippling levels of income tax. It's now that we seem to have everything is morphed into an economically soft left, that it's all about more government spending.
And the media in that space as well.
Well, I'm raising the issue, aren't I?
Yeah, no, I accept that. But like the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, a lot of people... Seamus Coffey has done the state some service. He has a very good article in today's Examiner, which I'd encourage people to read, where he outlines in great detail the risks going forward for the economy. A couple of missed opportunities. There was things, exchange traded funds, ETFs. They have this if you don't dispose of it after 8 years, you have deemed to have disposed, and you pay this. They reduced it from 41 to 38%.
They didn't get rid of
this deemed.
Well, actually, can we talk about some of those things maybe on the subscription edition?
Can we talk about one other thing, nothing to do with the budget then? So I just want to wish my former colleague, the person who actually worked with me on The Hard Shoulder and was a cub reporter on it, and also had worked in, doing packages and deconstruction on air for breakfast and so on.
And it didn't ruin his career.
No, well, put it like this, he went on to much better things. But I've always considered Kieran Cuddihy a very talented guy. He was doing The Tonight Show, which we also did, and so on. And he's now going to leave RTE. I'm not surprised at this. In fact, I told him...
No, he's leaving News Talk to join RTE.
I meant to join RTE. Ray D'Arcy, who had an illustrious career in your stable of Today FM and was headhunted to RTE. But Kieran,
and of course has left.
But Kieran
and not happy with the way
let's
it was
be clear,
handled.
Kieran is very woke. Very woke. He's right up there with Matt Cooper, Gavin Riley, and all the woke people in this country who let on to be in the commercial media. And he's well suited to RTE, you know what I mean? Because they have a particular view of the world, you know what I mean, when it comes to migration and other topics like that. So I won't poke that bear too much.
What I will say this, and I want to be careful in what I say here in relation
I'm
to
halfway you up there, yeah.
I know, I'm not falling for that. But there is, I'm hearing that there is concern in certain parts of RT about what they regard as the news talkization of Radio
Mark
1.
Simpson and Patricia Monaghan.
And now Kieran Cuddihy going in, sort of the old gang getting back together inside
But there'd be no way that old crusties like George Hook and Ivan Yates would be let anywhere near Montrose. So people can relax the cax on that one.
That is it for today's Path to Power. Don't forget, we have lots in the subscription edition and more on the presidential election campaign, given that today, in the time we have, we didn't get to talk about Heather Humphreys and Catherine Connolly and how that campaign is going.
And one of my gigs this week, I had to take a deep dive into insurance. There was this group formed, it's called PALI, which are adventure centres, pet farms, water rafting, different things across the country. They came together.
All the type of things you love doing.
No. In 2018, there was an existential crisis.
Yes.
That cover was withdrawn for employers' liability if you had an accident, a trip or a slip. And so it's very interesting to find out where insurance is at now. Will it still close businesses? And is the government doing enough?
Okay, and also we will be talking about how the environment apparently was completely forgotten about in the budget.
I heard you talking to John Gibbons. He was talking utter trash yesterday, and you didn't even challenge him on it. And you ended up talking about baby oil. I said, for feck's sake, what? Well, I mean, it's just not fair. At least we're not paying a licence fee for this rubbish.
So from me, Matt Cooper.
From me, Ivan Yates.
Until the next time, thank you.